The information provided by Trading Forex Price Action to you does not constitute personal financial advice. The information provided is of a general nature only and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation, or needs. It should not be used, relied upon, or treated as a substitute for specific professional advice.
Weekly Forecast.
Hey guys, this is a weekly forecast for February 21st through the 25th of 2022. Okay, we'll start off with the Eurjpy. This is a weekly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since there was a strong long trade that formed right here, and last year at this point right here, there was compact short price action that formed, which shows strong short strength. So in the long term, I'm short biased right back down to this pivot low right here. And moreover, as price pulled back to the weekly stop loss level at this point right here, there were consecutive confirmations of short-term short strength. So in the short term, I'm also short biased right back down to this pivot low right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. So the current setup I'm looking at is as follows. So since this weekly bias is short, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. As price pulled back to these levels right here, I was taking multiple short entries, again with the stop loss at this pivot high and its main target down here. So let me show you the current position I'm holding. Let's go over to the 1 hour chart. Okay, so on this 1 hour chart, initially I took a short position at 131.67 and another one at 131.70. And although price pulled back in these areas, I was mentioning I will not abort these short entries, for although price was going up, there were no signs of short-term extreme long strength. And so as price came down to these levels, I took another short entry at 132 at these levels right here. And then as price came down to these levels down here, and even pulled back to these levels, there were no signs of short-term extreme long strength. So I was keeping all the positions in. However, last week, if you recall in my midweek analysis, there were signs of short-term extreme long strength at this point right here. And so I aborted all 3 short entries and moreover took a counter bias long entry. However, recall I was mentioning, since this is a counter bias trade and the weekly bias is still short, I will be aborting this counter bias long entry on any signs of weakening long strength. And so on this 1 hour trend line breakout from this pivot to this pivot right here, and no immediate break back in, signaling waning long strength, on this pullback at this point right here, I aborted that counter bias long entry and furthermore took another short position, again with the same risk parameters, with a stop loss at 133.67 and its main target way below. Now furthermore this week, there was further confirmation that the weekly bias is in fact short with this 1 hour fake HNS that formed right here. And as you know, fake HNSs provide short-term long strength. However, price was able to reach its target height level, roughly in this area right here, before reaching its right shoulder stop loss level, which shows that short strength was able to override this long strength, thus creating short-term extreme short strength. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind is that when you're confirming a bias on the lower time frames, it is not the direction in which price moves that confirms a bias. It's more or less how price moves from point A to B, which confirms the higher time frames bias with these lower time frames. So again, as price moved all the way up to these levels right here, consistently, there were signs of short-term extreme short strength in this area, another one in this area, and this week at this 1 hour fake HNS, which reached its target height level. Okay, so that's just one thing to keep in mind. And so from this point on, if I get a further pullback, I'll still be willing to take more short positions as long as there is no confirmation of short-term extreme long strength. Alright, so I'll keep you guys updated with this setup. Alright, so let's go on to the Nzdusd pair. Okay, if you're having trouble understanding what I'm talking about in terms of strong trades and weekly biases and whatnot, please watch my price action trading course. For that course is designed to provide you the necessary information so you can understand these forecasts. Okay, this is a weekly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So back in 2020, this move up right here was solely based on momentum. Or in other words, the lower time frames were not confirming this long move up. And so since this long move was unsustainable, in the long term I am short biased. Right back down to this pivot low right here. And moreover on the daily chart, since there was a strong short trade that formed and a weak long trade that formed, in the short term I am also short biased. Right back down to this pivot low right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, so on this weekly chart, the last bias that formed was that there was a strong short trade that formed right here and a weak long trade that formed. And so the bias was short. And so as price pulled back, I was looking for short entries right back down to this pivot low right here. And that target was hit right here. So at this point, in terms of weekly biases, I'll be waiting for another long trade to form so I could gauge the strength of it against the prior weekly short trade. And if this long trade is again weaker than this weekly short trade, then the bias will remain short. Or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot low right here, where the hypothetical long trade formed before reaching this pivot high. And moreover, if the opposite is true, if this long trade is stronger than this last weekly short trade, then the bias will be long. Or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low, again where the hypothetical long trade forms. Okay, and moreover, like I mentioned earlier, there was a daily bias that formed right here. And so yesterday I did take a short entry, so let me go ahead and explain that to you. Let's go over to the daily chart. Okay, so on this daily chart, the last bias that formed was that there was a strong short trade that formed here, and a weak long trade that formed right here. And so the bias was short. So in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. And so as price pulled back to these levels yesterday, I took a short entry at 0.6722, roughly in these areas, with a stop loss at this pivot high and its main target at this level right here. Now let me go ahead and explain the setup to you. Let's go over to the 1 minute chart. Okay, so on this 1 minute chart, yesterday as price pulled back all the way up to these levels, again, there were no signs of short-term extreme long strength on this time frame. However, this trend line right here, from this pivot to this pivot right here, as you can see, there was a breakout and an immediate break back in, which signals short-term long strength, right? However, right after that, price was able to come right back down and reach the pivot low where that long strength was created, which shows me that short strength was able to override this short-term long strength, thus creating extreme short strength and moreover confirming that daily short bias. And so I took a short entry at 0.6722 at these levels right here, with a stop loss at 0.6731, a little bit above these levels right here. Now, although I took this short entry, this long bias on the daily chart is a little bit shaky in my opinion, so I will be watching the lower time frames to constantly confirm short-term short strength. And I'll be updating this trade on the community tab also, so please check that out. Okay, so let me just show you why I think this daily short bias is a little bit shaky. Let's go over to the 1 hour chart. Okay, so on this 1 hour chart, I took that short entry at 0.6722 roughly in these levels right here with the stop loss at this pivot high and its main target being right down here. Now I did take this short entry because there was confirmation on the 1 minute time frame of extreme short strength. However, that is a 1 minute confirmation. And at this level right here, try drawing this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. There was 1 hour confirmation of short-term long strength with this breakout and immediate break back in. And due to this confirmation long, although weaker than the confirmation that formed here, it is on the higher time frames. So it is something that bugs me. So as price pulls down, I'll constantly be watching for confirmation of this short strength on the lower time frames. Okay. Alright, so let's go on to the pound dollar. Okay, this is the monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since this horizontal trend line right here just became legitimate with its 3 touches at 1, 2, and 3 right here, and since price has a tendency to want to test strong levels, in the long term I am long biased. Right back up to this horizontal trend line, and more on the weekly chart since there was a strong long trade that formed and a weak short trade that formed. In the short term I am also long biased. Right back up to this pivot high right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is the weekly chart. For an explanation of what's been happening in price in this entire area, please refer to the Forex Recap series. Okay, but again, the most recent weekly setup is that there was a strong long trade and a weak short trade that formed right here. And so the bias is long. Or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And so I was waiting for a pullback right down to this 1.3300 levels for a long entry. However, this week's price has been showing that there is long strength in this move, and so perhaps we might not get that pullback. So let me show you what I'll be looking for to enter this long trade. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Alright, so on this 4-hour chart, as price came up to these levels, if you recall, I was mentioning there were no signs of short-term long strength, so we could expect a move down. And so price came down all the way down to these levels. However, I tried drawing this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now, as you can see at this point, there was confirmation of short-term long strength that formed. And so price came up, but then came right back down to hit the pivot low, or that long strength was created, which signals that there's short-term extreme short strength, right? However, right after, on the next pivot right here, there was actually a 1-minute V-shaped recovery that formed, which signals extreme long strength. And so price was able to recover and have another strong move up. Now at this point right here where the V-shaped recovery was formed, I actually wanted to take a mid-row long entry. However, due to overall trade management, I could not take this long entry. So from this point on, I will be willing to take another mid-row long entry as long as we could get some extreme long strength to form again. Okay, so let me show you what I'll be looking for. Let's go over to the 1-hour chart. Alright, so on this 1-hour chart, at this point right here, there was actually a fake double top that formed, which shows short-term long strength, right? However, price could reach its target height level, roughly at these levels right here, before reaching the second top stop loss level. That'll show that the short strength was able to override this long strength, providing extreme short strength. And so if this happens, I perhaps can wait for another pullback right back down to the 1.3300 levels for even better long entry. However, another situation will be is that if price does fall down to these levels again, and again makes extreme long strength through price patterns or even perhaps a V-shaped recovery again, at that point I will be willing to take a mid-row long entry, again with the same risk parameter as I mentioned on the weekly chart. Okay, so I'll keep you guys updated with this setup also. So please refer to the midweek analysis. Okay. Alright, so that's it for the weekly forecast. I hope you guys have a great week. And thanks for watching. Okay, bye.